What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Virzi Effect podcast show. My name is Paul Virzi. You guys listening to episode 484, and the last few have been bangers, and I'm going to tell you right now, this next one is no exception. Thank you guys so much for the kind comments about the last episode. Check out the Virzi Effect on iTunes, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcast. My guest today is somebody I wanted on the show for a really long time. Somebody who's hilarious, hilarious comedian, great father, entrepreneur, I would say. Entrepreneur and a Renaissance man. You guys know him from his hilarious special, Louis J. Gomez Presents Louis J. Gomez, and one of the hosts of the very popular podcast, Legion of Skanks. Louis J. Gomez is on TVE. Louis, thanks so much for being here, man.
What's going on, Paul? Very happy to be here. Love you, buddy.
It's
all the same thing, literally all the same shit you just said about me goes right back to you. You're a fucking great father, great comedian, and an entrepreneur. We're all running businesses, man. This is it. You got a podcast, you got a fucking comedy career, you got, that's it. But it's truly a business.
Well, you know what? You were doing this shit though, and this is why I commend you. And this is why I think that you are, I'm actually not just saying this because you're on the show, dude. And that's why I wanted you on the show. You're actually, you're an inspiration, man, because you were doing the shit that comedians are forced to do because of a pandemic. You were doing this shit before it was like forced. Like, you know, me, for example, I had to build this studio in my fucking house because I had no choice. And I wasn't really doing the online shit the way you were doing it because I was just so focused on getting on the road, getting the next hour, getting better at stand-up, when you have to kind of do everything. And you were doing that. You started a network very early. I remember one time me and you were doing a podcast and you were like, yeah, I got a big announcement coming up. And it was you launching fucking Gas Digital, dude. And here you are so further along. Not only do you have your successful podcast, but so many others. And you had that vision before everybody, man. So there's something to be said about that, man.
It's funny you bring up me announcing that I have an announcement, because that's one of my techniques. I feel like when you do shit, you always got to have something going on, you know? So even I do this all the time. If I don't have anything to announce, I'll just announce that I have an announcement on Friday. And then I'm like, well, I got to have an announcement now. I got to get something going on this week, you know? But that's sort of, that's the, you're sort of marketing yourself and, you building a brand around yourself, and people should be excited about it. So yeah, I mean, the network thing, me and my buddy Ralph Sutton started Gas Digital. A lot of people don't know Gomez and Sutton is what Gas stands for. And we were working with a lot of podcast networks. We were working with all the networks on the East Coast and the West Coast. I've had multiple podcasts for over a decade now. And we just saw a lot of, it was just the beginning of sort of a business. Now podcast networks are a thing. Now a podcast producer is a real job. There are podcast producers that make real deal money. But when we started this, 5-6 years ago, more at this point, there was like a podcast producer wasn't a job. Like nobody, we were one of the first companies that were sort of creating that position in that space. And we have, about 15 producers that work on staff right now. We have 22 shows. And what's cool about the network, because you don't need a podcast network, but you have an entire team of people that are really, really passionate, that are really creative, that are really talented. And they come together every single, every day. And it's just a constant sharing of ideas, seeing what works for one show, what doesn't work for another. And we've sort of created this culture. And at this point, Gas Digital itself, it has become its own sort of like niche. Sort of, we've cornered this market for, I don't want to say free speech because it has negative connotations now for some reason. It's fucking crazy. Yeah, but just sort of like freedom of expression, freedom of creativity. We work with podcasters that want to just come in and just have the natural conversations, have everything taken care of for them, not have to worry about all the little bullshit details that you and I have had to worry about for years, So I think that it's a, I mean, it's a really fulfilling experience as well. Like not only do it with stand-up, we love doing stand-up, everything I did, because I got on stage when I was 22 years old and I was like, dude, this is what I want to do with my life. We become addicted to the attention and the laughter, and it makes us feel great. It taps into that Freudian thing where you're like, oh, I just fucking feel incredible. And I realized very quickly that it wasn't going, it was necessity for me as well. So I have my own pandemic in that I'm not that talented or likable. So that was my pandemic that I realized years ago. So my hand was forced to start doing things for myself, to start producing for myself, to start like I was producing stand-up comedy shows when it wasn't cool. Back in the day, it wasn't cool to produce a stand-up comedy show at a bar. You were considered a fucking hack to do that. So I was doing that at comedy clubs, and that before I even got into comedy, I was actually producing comedy shows. So I just realized that I wasn't ready to go down the path of getting these fucking network people to like me, getting the industry to like me, managers, agents, people that are at the helm and gatekeepers. They weren't going to dig my shit. You know, I'm a tough pill to swallow. I'm abrasive. I'm kind of a dick. You know, I'm not, but I am. You know, at the very the first impression of me is like, oh, this guy's fucking abrasive as shit. So instead of, you know, trying to do that dance and navigate that world, I said, well, I'll just fucking do it myself and try to build an audience for myself. And that can never be taken away. The audience, dude, and I mean this, I could kill a puppy every week on Legion of Skanks. I could snap its neck and my audience would never leave me. They'd be like, you know, I don't like his kill a puppy bit, but he's still pretty great, you know?
Yeah, really. After the third puppy, I was like, all right, come on, man.
Can we at least do some new material? Kill a kitten or something.
All right, dead fucking puppy. No, man, but you had the realization of it, man. Like, I remember being at Levity. I was headlining Levity, and your sister was there working, and she was like, you know, and I remember this, man, because, you know, when I see somebody kind of, me and you, as a matter of fact, man, like, even though we're different, there's a lot of similarities. And that's why we were talking on the phone, and she was like, oh, my brother said he's going to do this and he's going to start his own thing. And then you fucking did. And I remember seeing that, being like, that needs to be commended. But you also had a son. And I remember when Lucas was born, my son is 11. So he's a little older than James, right?
Yeah, James is 8.
Yeah. So, and I remember people like, man, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. And I'm like, no, dude, like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Like, and it's what you said. It's like, I'm going to adapt and be in this. It's like adapt or die. Me having a son or a family is not going to automatically fucking make me, as if anything, it's going to probably get me stronger and make me go harder. I knew what I was doing on the road and stuff.
Well, failure is not an option. And at that point, so, and I heard the same thing. There was a lot, Ari Shaffir was like, dude, you're going to end up quitting comedy. You know, you got a kid now. It's not going to be easy. You got to, and I was like, what are you talking about? Now I have a reason to fucking live. Now, anytime that doubt creeps in and I won't get shit done for a few weeks because we're all fucking, you know, psychopaths and we all have our own insecurities. Now it's never an option. You know, my only option is to succeed for this kid, not only just to give him a nice life, but to teach him the really valuable lesson, which is that you can literally do anything you set your mind to. You can create these goals and set these specific goals. And as long as you genuinely believe in your ability to hit them, you can do it. And that's literally anything. I remember when my son was born, I sort of set this goal. I was like, by the time he's 4 years old, I want to make sure that I'm making enough money. I have a nice enough home. I have just certain things, because I remember when I was a kid, I don't have any memories before I was 4. So I was like, okay, well, by the time he's 4, because I can fuck up as much as I want between 1 and 4. I mean, obviously I'm a peaceful parent. I've never even yelled at my son. Like I you know, my, you know, but when I say fuck up, I just mean like, you know, it was sort of like, I just said, I need to get my shit together by the time he's 4 years old. By the time he could have a memory of his dad's home, of his dad, like, I got to be on TV. I got to have shit going on. I got to have fans. I got to have a nice place. I got to have these things. And sure enough, like clockwork, exactly when he was 4, I started really breaking through with a lot of these things. You know, this is 4 years ago. That's when Gas Digital, we had started it a few years before that, but that's when it started to really churn and burn, started making some cash. The first few years that business was running, we weren't making anything. We were just spending money. And the lesson that I learned there was that was an arbitrary goal, an arbitrary timeline. It had the only thing constant there was me setting a goal and me wanting to hit that goal. So then I started thinking like, okay, well, I need to start thinking bigger and setting bigger goals, because I'm in complete control of it. That's not a coincidence. It's there's a reason that everybody pays the 90% of New York is house broke, meaning that they make exactly enough money to pay all their bills. right? And I don't think that they're living to their means. I think that they're setting these goals every month where it's this line and they just hit the goal. Everyone we know is constantly hitting goals every fucking day. Every month you pay your rent, you hit that goal. And when you step back from it and go like, wait a minute, why don't I just set that goal to be, you know, twice as much money or twice as much creative fulfillment or whatever it is, and you realize you're in control of the goal and you're in control of that process. You know, that became very, very apparent with my child and with how I sort of, you know, I set my life up according to that. So it was a very, very valuable learning lesson. But I don't think that having a kid, I mean, for some people, maybe people that don't have a belief in their own ability, they go, oh, I got to go get a regular day job and I got to, you know, have some security and I have to. The only security that I ever had was my own belief in my own ability. And it was really, really valuable to learn.
No, dude, man, you just fucking hit the nail on the head multiple times. And what you did there when you said, like, by the time my son is 4, I did that too. I was like, by the time, you know, I'm like I would just say, by the time I'm 35, I want to have good credit. I want to have a house. I want to have 2 healthy kids, and I want my career to be here. Before I'm 35, I want to go to Montreal. Before this, I want to get an album and a special. And when you put that into existence, and so what you did was you were like, by the time my son can really start understanding what's going on, I'm going to do that. That's actually out there. And I believe that, man, as crazy as people say it is, like when you put that out into existence and then you plant that in your head and it's out there, you just made that happen because there's no other option. But now there are weak people. And, you know, you said something on Twitter the other day where you were like, I'm not a fucking follower. I'm a leader. I'm going to do. You basically said, and I loved that when you did that, I was like, I'm calling this motherfucker. You were like, I'm going to do but you were basically saying, like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to let what's going on in this business dictate. I'm going to lead and I'm going to do what I'm going to do. And you were right. Cause you look what you did with the podcast and the online shit. And you also have an understanding of who you are. You're like, look, if industry's not fucking with me now, I'm not going to chase them until they start fucking with me. I'm just going to do what I do. And hopefully, if anything, they're going to come to me. And if they don't, I don't even need that, but I'm going to go and do me. And there's something to be said about that. But what it shows is that you are just one of the dudes that's going to succeed in this business because you have the strength to do it and under any means necessary. And there are some people, unfortunately, that if they did have a kid, they would have just crawled in a ball and eventually been out of the business and had a meaningless job where they paid their bills, they took care of their kid, and they would grow up regretting it later and going, fuck, what if? And you know what? It takes a certain person, man. That's really what it does.
Well, success, in my opinion, when I define success, it's freedom. You know,
right?
It's creative freedom. It is that you wake up, you open your eyes, and you go, I'm going to do what I want to do today. And the luck, here's where I'm lucky. I like work. I like the business side of things. I like doing what I'm doing. And not only do we run the podcast network, we have a merch business, we have an advertising company, we have a podcast studio rental business. You know, I'm just constantly, we have new businesses that are born out of sort of this one concept all the time. And we're constantly experimenting. And I really get real fulfillment out of that. And I'm lucky in that sense. I'm truly lucky that I can tap into this thing where I get motivated by things like that. But success, in my opinion, is just having that freedom. And you know, for me, and I did chase the industry a little bit, you know, but what I realized, because I did Last Comic Standing, I did Montreal New Faces, I did all the things that you're supposed to do as a young comic. I auditioned, you know, so many times for all these different shows. I went through the process of submitting late night tapes over and over again, getting notes, going back, sending them back in. And what you're doing is I'm doing all this shit I don't want to do. All this shit, I don't want to do any of it. I don't want to go to a party in Montreal and rub elbows with fucking WME. Like, that was my whole time. And I was like, oh, Mom, I'm sitting at the table with WME right now. I was like, oh, are they going to like me? Are they going to sign me? Like, it sucked. It fucking sucked. It was not success, even though these were like benchmarks for success, right? And it was what I realized I was going down a path of constantly conforming and changing what I wanted to do. I want to say whatever words I want to say. I want to be able to, you know, be as creative as I want to be. And I feel like comedians, we are built to sell out from the get-go. You know, we're built, it's sort of like, well, you got to get a TV thing, you're gonna have to change your jokes, you can't say this, you can't say that. And whereas I think that's just, in my opinion, that's a different job than I do. Like Nate Bargatze, who I love, is like my brother, he's my son's godfather.
Yeah.
He's done 30 late night sets, you know. He has a different job than me. He is he's a stand-up comedian through and through, and it is his job to go and figure out how to put his funny in these different with as they change the parameters and they change sort of the rules for him, still sort of get his funny off, and he's incredible at it. That really, when I started doing those things and started going to these meetings and going through these processes, it made me feel very small, and I started to shrink, and I had no confidence. And I'm all confidence, you know. So it's not so much that it was like, you know, it was just necessity. It was who I was deep down inside. Like I wasn't going to be able to do that. I wasn't going to go down a successful path. Do I remember on Last Comic Standing? It was one of the most, it was, I think back how cringy this is now, but it's like, let me explain to you how like fucking, how comics have to think sometimes, right? So I'm on Last Comic Standing. I have a new son. He's maybe 1 or 2 at the time when I was on Last Comic Standing. And they're doing these little packages like behind the scenes, and they're like, oh, you know, talk to us about what your motivation is. And I pull out a picture of my son on my phone, and I was like, oh, this is my motivation. This is what a fucking hack piece of shit I was. I covered the logo for the phone. It was like a Motorola or whatever it was. I covered the logo with my thumb because I knew that they wouldn't be able to show the logo. They weren't going to show this if this logo that wasn't a sponsor for the show was on air. But I consciously, as I'm having this supposed fucking real moment about my kid who I'm like loving, I'm covering this logo consciously.
Yeah.
And it's gross. It's just fucking, it's the grossest thing in the world. And that, you know, all of these things, you know, were just learning experiences.
Yeah.
But that sort of, in my opinion, that was very indicative of who I had to be or who I was trying to become. And I was like, that's not, I'm wearing a suit jacket, I'm on fucking NBC, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And you realize it later, like, dude, I remember wanting to be on Chelsea Lately.
Yeah.
You know, just because that was that guys that were doing that were touring, and it was helping tickets. So it was like, oh, if you get on Chelsea Lately and you just shoot the shit about pop culture with Chelsea fucking Handler, who every time I saw that fucking show for the 5 minutes I tuned in, if it was even 5 minutes, I didn't like or agree with. I don't want to talk about fucking Janet Jackson. I don't want to fucking, but hey, if it could get and now I'm looking back going, I wanted to do that. Like I reached out to the booker of that shit.
Oh, dude, you should fucking read your emails to bookers on this show. That should be an episode of the Virzi Effect where you read all your emails to bookers, read the notes that you got back from late night, them telling you to change it. That'd be a really interesting episode.
Oh, dude, man. Yeah. And I remember like the booker of Conan was like, yeah, and do this and change this. And it didn't need to be changed. And the booker of this one, and not that there were bad people. The people that actually did take the time to give me notes, even if they said no, at least they fucking answered. Like one guy was being like, dude, no, but here's why no. And I was like, I could actually appreciate that. Then you had the ones that you
the problem with those guys though, is that you have to take everything with a grain of salt because like, they have to justify their positions. Right. So if they're not, you know, if they're not giving you those notes and they go, oh, this is great, this is incredible, come on in, like they don't have a reason to have a job there anymore. So they almost go like I remember I sent in notes to Conan and they approved like 3 minutes of the 5 minutes. And I was like, I got another 1.5 minutes. All I got to do is come up with another 1.5 minutes and I'm going to be on Conan. I was like, this is incredible. And it took me probably another 3 to 4 months to get another tape with the extra 1.5 that I wanted. I sent in the next tape. This motherfucker, the jokes that he approved, he was like, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And I was like, what the? It made no sense. Like he didn't even there was no rhyme or reason. There was no philosophy there. There was no nothing. The jokes were fine 3 months before and then they weren't. It was just this stupid fucking game. And I was like, well, I just can't do this anymore. First of all, I'm a dirty comic. I'm filthy. And it was just sort of like, it just felt like selling out without even getting the payoff.
Right. Yeah, man. I went through some shit with the Tonight Show, and right before pandemic got real close. And I was just like, you know what, man, my dream, that wasn't my dream. My dream was to I'm in this game because of Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor. My dream was to do long sets, tell stories, be funny with quick jokes, but also talk about my family. Like that's kind of what I wanted to do. And it was never the suit and tie on the Tonight Show. It wasn't.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sure that we have friends that probably watch Seinfeld and guys like that on the Tonight Show, and they're like, "Oh, I want to do that." And that
Right.
was not me anyway. So it's like, why am I chasing this thing? Because you said something. It is like, oh, that's a checklist of what we probably should be doing, or people think in order for us to get the respect we should be doing. But it's like, no. And like you said, you mentioned Nate, but Nate's a clean comic. You're not. I'm not. Like we curse, we say things that, and it's like, yeah, kind of go into your wheelhouse, man. But you do this thing too, where, you know, people have, I've seen it too, because I'm obviously not going to give anybody satisfaction of mentioning names, but you know, somebody that you had to deal with going at you is the same person that has, you know, gone at me and other people. And it's like, you do what we have to do, which is just never conform and never fucking change because of somebody going at you or somebody trying to change you.
No, the second you apologize, or the second it's troll culture, right? All those guys, all those bloggers, and they're trolls. How do you deal with a troll? You could block them, or you could ignore them. I don't even block them. I don't even give trolls the satisfaction of blocking them. The only people I block is if somebody comments like some nasty shit on my kid on Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're gone. I'm not even gonna fucking deal with it.
Yeah.
Just because it's not even about me. I can handle any mean words anybody in the world could say about me. There's nothing that anybody can say that my fucking own mother hasn't said to me that's worse. But the reality is, like, I got family members that are
Yeah.
not thick-skinned psychopath, podcast comedians who say crazy shit. Most of them are just normal people, and they can't wrap their head around, somebody saying that about a kid, and they get very upset. So, but it's truly just, these guys are professional trolls. They want to they want this sort of volley back and forth, and they want their attention. A lot of those guys are failed comedians. A lot of those guys try to do comedy,
Yeah.
and they were never good. They never got anything out of it, right? And then they got a little bit of success by writing a blog that gets somebody fired. They go, oh shit, this is the most I've ever felt like I've had an impact in the world.
Yeah.
They chase that dragon. The same reason me and you killed when we were young comics, and we were like, oh shit, I'm chasing that dragon, and everything is built up around sort of that moment.
Yeah.
That is them killing on stage, is that blog that he writes, or this guy that tweets a bunch of shit that he fucking gets accolades for. He's getting retweets. Do you know Jamie Kilstein?
Yes. I never met him, but I know who he is.
Jamie, I was friends with Jamie the first night I ever hung out with Big J Okerson. Jamie Kilstein was there, and this first night I met Jamie Kilstein, we all went to the movies. Pete Holmes, it was like this crazy, like wacky group of people, like 15 years ago, and just a lot of Kurt Metzger brought me because I was friends with Kurt, and that's how I sort of met everybody. And Jamie, I talked to him about this on his podcast because Jamie Kilstein was a really interesting case. He was just a regular comic, did the same thing, did Montreal, did Conan, did all the things you're supposed to do. And he wasn't really having a ton of success in terms of financial success, building a fan base. The real metrics in this business, right? Fans and money. That's it. So that's the way you can sort of gauge this. Do I got fans? Do I got money? Are both of those things increasing? A byproduct of both of those things increasing? Or I shouldn't say that. A byproduct of your creativity is sort of both of those things increasing. You can use those as a metric, right? Or how good you are at what you're doing. You go, am I making more money? Do I have more fans? I'm doing something right. And I could just sort of look to that, as opposed to, is this joke better than this joke? Like, that's sort of a baseline level. And Jamie, he started this podcast with his wife, Citizen Radio, and then within like a few months he was making, like, they had like it was before Patreon even, it was like a donation type thing, like through PayPal, but he was making like $1,000 a month off his podcast. And I remember that feeling when I first started making $1,000 a month off of a podcast, because that was like, I'm paying my rent. That was sort of like what in my head, I was like, I'm paying my rent off my podcast. That's crazy. I'm speaking into a microphone and money showing up into a bank account. If that's not magic, I don't know what else it is. It's like I'm saying like a spell, and then you say these words, certain words in a certain order, and money shows up.
Money comes, yeah.
It's crazy. It's the craziest thing in the world to me. And this was a super left-leaning podcast, super woke feminist. Before it was cool to be woke and feminist. This is back in the fucking day. And all of a sudden he's making money. He's got a few hundred fans. He's getting a little success. Social media is starting to pick up. So he went down that path hard. He just stayed. He said, fuck it, dude. That's who I am now. And he went down this path and he became like, he ended up blocking me on Twitter. We were friends. Me and Jamie were really big into MMA. Me and Jamie were friends. And he sort of let that whole world pick him up to eventually where he didn't really have an identity beyond that anymore. And whether it was subconscious or conscious, he sort of became this dude. And it was because it was like, fuck, I need success. Oh, sorry. My mic.
All good, man.
Hold on. Can you hear me? Sorry, dude. My mic.
No, I got you. All good.
Accident. So it reminds me of these other guys where it's like they get a little bit of success going down this path and then they go, fuck, I got to run with it, because they don't have their actual ability to be funny or to sort of do what they really want to do. All of those guys were comics. They were stand-ups or improv guys, and they were never able to do anything creatively. So this is sort of the next best thing for them. And it happened with me too. Like that's why I do dirty, fucked up comedy, is because it was a path that I started getting success. I tried to do the Tonight Show and Last Comic Standing in Montreal and all these things, and I wasn't getting any success. And then I figured out this path that like a lot of people were afraid to do. People are afraid, especially now with cancel culture, people are afraid to say fucked up things now. So I've sort of, I'm in this specific niche, but now I'm sort of stuck here. Like now I can't turn around. Now it's too late. So I'm a hypocrite almost to point my finger at all these guys when I'm essentially doing the same thing.
So do you worry about, not that you worry, but is now that you feel like if you wanted to do a movie or a show, is that something that but you don't care about that?
It's not that I don't care about that. It's just not going to happen. It's not that it's not going to happen. My agent, I have an agent that sends me for TV stuff still. God bless him. And I got a live touring agent. And
God bless that man.
God bless that man. I'll get in. Hey, there's a new cartoon coming to CBS. We want you to, and I'm like, do you have any idea what would happen? The second I got hired for something like this, I would get fired because they're going to go through my entire litany of fucking N words and F words and every other word you could possibly say, because I do the most offensive podcast on earth. So, I know that is no longer on the table. It's not that I wouldn't do certain things. Like if I had a friend who got a TV show or cartoon, I would do a walk-on guest role, because at that point it's sort of like, the idea of becoming a leading man. I mean, I was in acting classes for a while. I did all that shit, like literally everything you could possibly do as a comedian. I did everything. I took 5 or 6 different acting classes, audition classes. I mean, everything. In fact, I was in an acting class with, who the fuck was it? It was Monroe was in the class.
Who was the teacher? Joanna Bexton or no?
Yes, it was Joanna Bexton, who she hated me. She fucking hated me.
I did Joanna Bexton, dude.
Her audition class. It was good.
It was, no, you know what? I did the sitcom acting course because Rodney Laney goes, hey man, go in. Now I realize Rodney was getting a discount for getting me in. That's why no, man, I fucking hated every minute of it. I was nervous, dude. I would walk there with anxiety attacks because, dude, I'd rather perform in front of 3,000 people on a whim than read a fucking read a monologue in front of 10 actors judging me, dude. I was really panicked and I was really hard. And she said out loud, she goes, Paul, she called me Paul V because there was another Paul there. And she goes, Paul V could be really good if he lets himself go. But I was just so used to, the other shit. But that's so funny that your agent is sending you. You're the new voice of SpongeBob.
Yeah, dude. It's crazy. Who am I fucking thinking of? Why am I blanking? Oh, Vladimir Camaño.
Yeah, I know that.
Vlad was a good actor. Vlad got a bunch of TV work. He's got TV shows. Me and Vlad took the same class. And I remember, dude, he was so bad. He was so uncomfortable in that class. Like he was just like, he wouldn't deliver his lines. He would almost mumble them. And I watched him literally go through that process, the same exact process that I was trying to go to. And he became a really good actor because he really gave a fuck. Acting is such a different thing than anything else we do. So being a comic like we're so comfortable in our skin. You figure out what your voice is. You're finally comfortable getting on stage. You're finally getting, and then you got to go be an actor, and it sort of strips down everything, especially when if you're dealing with like real acting technique,
Yeah.
and just sort of like on the baseline level, where you're trying to build a good base of being a good actor.
Yeah.
It's so foreign and uncomfortable. And it just made me feel very, very uncomfortable. And it never like it was just it was the most naked I ever felt, was trying to be somebody else. So
Yes.
yeah, I never went down that path, or I started going down all these paths, but I never had any real success down any of those paths.
Yeah, yeah, because you were yeah, it's just sometimes George Carlin, man, he goes, I was just never good. George Carlin was never a good actor. And he said it was just because it was just so hard for him to get out of himself. It was so hard for him to not be, and then when you watch his act, you kind of get it. When somebody is just so, I guess, real. But then, like, yeah, there is techniques, like, because you look at Pryor. Pryor actually was a good actor. Pryor was a really good
Eddie
actor.
Murphy, who you mentioned Eddie Murphy before. It's funny, is that was like the first stand-up that I ever really watched, like the first special, Delirious and Raw. I could probably recite them verbatim. Like I know, like my mom
Raw, it was Raw for me. My dad took me to Raw because I was 10. Raw was 87. So I was around I was around 9 years old, and Raw, I was too young for Delirious, but
Yeah.
Raw was the one that fucking got me.
Oh, you guys saw it in the movie theater?
My dad, yeah, my mother and
awesome.
grandmother forbid him to take me, and he took me and my brother to Movie Land in Yonkers.
That's awesome.
It's funny, actually. Dean Edwards used to go to that movie theater, but yeah, Yonkers had a place called Movie Land. There was a line around the fucking, and it was Eddie Murphy Raw, and my dad was like, "Don't worry, I'm gonna take you, dude." And I was just fucking locked, dude.
Yeah,
because he was a rock star, dude.
I didn't see it obviously in the movie theater. I saw it years later. I mean, 87, I was only 5 years old. I probably saw it when I was 8 or 9. And my mom, she showed me both of them, both specials, Delirious and Raw. And that was, that was my first real experience with stand-up, where as we know it today, like stand-up comedy, this guy was telling stories, he was doing voices, he was doing characters, he just had straight up jokes, and it was an hour and a half. Each special was an hour and a half. There were these movies, and it was so much bigger, and it was, in my opinion, and still to this day, I think the epitome of like what a special should be. If you're, rock star comic, like that is like, and I loved Dice, I loved all these guys growing up, but Eddie Murphy just did it better than anybody that I saw do it. And I started really getting into comedy. It was always urban stuff. Martin Lawrence, fucking loved Martin Lawrence, loved all the Def Jams. Me and my sister would watch Def Comedy Jam. And what's funny is when I started producing comedy shows in New York, this is before I started doing stand-up. This is right after 9/11. I moved to New York City. I started producing comedy shows. I was running street teams all over New York City, trying to sell comedy club tickets. That was like my business. And I started booking some comics. It was 2 or 3 comics that I booked on my shows that I knew from Def Comedy Jam. And my mind was just blown. I was like, whoa, this is fucking absolutely crazy. Reggie, what the fuck's his name? I'm blanking, whatever. Doesn't even matter. But it was like, that whole urban comedy world, that's what I grew up on. It's so funny because people call Legion of Skanks racist and they call us Nazis and all this other shit. You're like, guys, I grew up as a poor Puerto Rican kid watching just urban comedy. These guys are talking about defending the rights of the working class. Do you guys have any idea where I came from?
Yeah.
Any fucking idea the horse shit that I came from?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know where I was going.
I came up, no, dude, I came up in black rooms. Talent and Capone, I was one of the only white dudes. Dude, I drove from upstate New York to 125th Street, Harlem, Uptown Comedy Club, 250 black audience members wanted to boo me off stage, no money. And me and there was one other white dude. And then Talent saw me and I did the Boston on a Sunday, which everybody wanted to do. Everybody was hanging out. And he's like, no, dude, you're funny. I'm putting you up. And I was nervous and scared, but black rooms actually really helped me. The urban scene helped me because they would put me up. It's like, yo, this white boy's funny. Put him up. Then Capone and all those New York kings of comedy liked me. And then obviously though, but you also don't want to get stuck in that. You want to do all rooms. You want to do urban rooms, and you want to do mainstream rooms. So the material becomes universal. But I want to ask you a question before we wrap this up. This is great. We're going by so fast here, but so when you say people say yeah, you're a Nazi and it's racist and all that stuff, you've been I noticed that you do something that I did, and then I learned that I just can't do, but I've seen you go at these fucking people. And, you know, I learned a couple things, and some really great experienced comedians told me things, and also up and comers who dealt with it told me too. When somebody goes at you online, it means two things. One, yeah, you're whatever your content is hitting them in a certain way. Yes. But two, it means you're moving up. And it means you're growing, because what's happening now is these people know you, they're talking about you, and you're going to eventually have that. And I experienced that, but I was not good with it, because I'm like, in my mind, Lewis, I'm going, wait a minute, I'm a good dude, man. So like, you don't know me, and now you're saying some shit about me, and so it really bothered me. And then I learned, I go, oh, okay, like you can't do it. Like we were drunk one night, a bunch of us. We went to the Tampa Bay. It was like me, it was Bartnick, it was Burr, it was some agents, it was a bunch of us, and we went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers New England Patriots game. This is when Brady was still on the Patriots, and we get hammered. And we took a picture there. Me and Bartnick took a picture there together. Hammered, big drinks, fucking those over, and we're fucking hammered. And we get in this big truck service, and we're leaving. And people start saying shit about the picture. Yeah, Bartnick's hair. Yeah, Virzi looks like his little brother. And they just start being, but then it starts getting nasty.
Yeah.
So, dude, everyone's talking in the truck. It's a true story. And I'm sitting in the back, and it's bothering me. And I'm drunk. And I'm drunk. Yeah, and I'm drunk. So everyone's talking in the car, and I'm just reading. I'm quiet, right? And every one of them, I went back, and this is when I learned my lesson. I went back to every one of them. And I swear to God, like a fucking Jedi, Burr is sitting there, and he starts noticing that I'm not talking. And he just goes, don't do it, Virzi. Paul, don't do what I know you're doing. And I'm going like, fuck you, you fuck you. Like, I just was like, you fucking nobody with your 26
Oh no, yeah. Oh, dude, that's the worst. You can't point out how little followers they have, because their response is, I'm not a professional comedian, you fucking loser.
Oh,
it's a troll account.
And ever since then, and ever since like anything, and like I remember after the special came out on Comedy Central and it did really good online numbers, that's when, oh yeah, he's funny, except somebody actually said, like, because I made fun of Trump tweeting. This is years ago, but like, yeah, he was funny until I noticed his Democratic like agenda. Meanwhile, I'm not a Democrat. You know, I'm a registered independent.
Making fun of the person in power, as we should.
Yeah, and that's when, and somebody said, no, when a special comes out or something like that, there is an adjustment period of hate. That there's going to be more of that. And I see what you guys do. But you're also somebody that you fucking, and sometimes I'll literally watch your tweets and be like, dude, I get it, but you'll be like, fuck you, eat a dick, go fuck. And I'm just going like, this kid doesn't give a fuck. And does anything really, like, is there ever a part of you going, man, like if this dude knew me, he wouldn't do it? Or you just beyond, like, you're just like, fuck that. Like, does anything ever bother you where you're like, man, this dude clearly has me wrong and I wish he knew, or no?
I used to be that way. I used to, like, the first time somebody trolled me, there was one guy, like, way before I should have had a troll. Like, when I was doing Bobby Kelly's podcast regularly, where I had no fans, it was just like, I was sort of coming onto his show. And then I had one guy that would troll me. I think he's still around. To this day, I still think he does it. He makes these troll accounts, and he used to hashtag one word to, like, let me know. He used to hashtag the word interns, because I had an intern on my podcast, Hammer Fisting, which was a really small podcast. But I even knew then to treat it like it was a bigger podcast. I was like, no, I got an intern. This is a show that had 1,500 listens an episode, right? I was like, no, we need interns, obviously. So he'd always hashtag the word intern to let me know it was him, and he would always create new accounts.
Tinkle? Was that with Chris Tinkle?
It was with Chris Tinkle. Yeah,
I know Chris.
Me, Chris, Vic, me and Dave Smith actually started that podcast back in the day. But he would always tweet, and I would get so, I would fantasize about finding him one day. I was gonna fucking find this guy, and I'm gonna fucking beat him to death with this fucking dude. I used to get so mad. And then it became a thing where I think it was probably the Opie and Anthony subreddit. Dude, they fucking trashed me so hard. I don't remember why. I don't remember what the thing was, but it literally desensitized me to trolling, to the point where it's like I literally couldn't affect me anymore, because all of these words. And then after a while, the philosophy started to evolve, and I started to realize a few things. Number one, this is all the action is. They're just doing this.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they move their pinky
Yeah.
fraction
Yeah.
that way, and then they
That's
go,
a great way to look
what is
at it.
this? What am I even freaking out about? They're just
Yeah.
doing this in the world. There's a person doing this. The words don't actually really mean anything. You know, they're not, it's not real. Somebody makes a joke about my kid, I'm not going like, no, he doesn't actually want to molest my child. I know that they're just saying, why would I get myself worked up over this? And
Yeah.
this is the same as this. And if somebody likes me or doesn't like me, they're sort of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about how I started having people that would hate me at first. This is a regular thing. People really hate me at first, and then they would love me. They listen to me for a few hours and they go, oh, I really get what this guy's doing, because they start to realize that you're a good dude. They start to realize that there's other qualities to you besides the dumb jokes we say. And, you know, so I have a lot, most people that are fans of mine started off hating me. And then I started realizing, like, oh shit, because I'm an old school sales guy. I've only had sales jobs in my life.
Me too.
You know, your emotional triggers. When you're trying to sell something, you're looking for emotional triggers. You got to get people emotional. And hate is a strong emotion. Indifference is not an emotion. If somebody doesn't know about you, doesn't give a fuck about you, you're not connecting with them in any way. If I can get somebody that hates me to really love me. If somebody's indifferent or doesn't give a fuck or isn't paying attention, that is a much longer journey to love. And it's a much longer journey into turning them into a fan. So I started to sort of embrace the hate, and I fuck with people. So most of the time when you see me trashing somebody on Twitter and going back and forth, I'm like playing with my kid, and I look at my phone for a second and I go, go fuck your mother. Hope she doesn't cancel. And then I drop my phone. I walk away. And then my fans start attacking that guy and start trashing him and making fun of his face and fucking. And it's, for me, it's just sort of a game. This is like almost like a video game when I jump onto Twitter and I start going back and forth. There is never any emotion. I really, truly don't get emotional about it. They're genuinely just words. So at this point, I've learned that it's also part of my brand to fuck with people back, and a lot of the time those are just fans that are just trolling you just to sort of get that reaction as well. So I just don't take that seriously. There's a few people in the world who know who I am. Right. I used to get sort of upset, especially, you know, when they started writing articles about us, because I've had a half a dozen articles at least written about how we're fucking Skankfest. My comedy festival is problematic, and we're fucking, you know, an alt-right fucking breeding ground and blah, 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 which is all just bullshit. You've never heard me once. I talk on podcasts for 12 hours a week. I've never supported any political candidate. I've never claimed to be right wing or alt-right or a Proud Boy or support Trump. You've never even heard me say anything hateful about any group of people in the fucking world. There's no race, there's no women, there's no nothing. We make fucked up jokes and we say fucked up things, you know, and out of context, you can say, oh, look what they said about black people or about women or whatever, but they're jokes. And our fan base is so fucking diverse. They truly are jokes. But I would, I would get sort of emotional about it back then, because I would think like, okay, my kid's going to grow up one day and I'm going to have to explain to him that I'm not a Nazi. I'm going to have to sit him down and be like, well, he's going to see some shit online. But then I've disconnected from that as my son's gotten older, as I've gotten older. You're never going to be able to convince my son that I'm anything but his fucking superhero. My son will always see me as his fucking dad. There's nothing that I could do wrong. My son, I raise him a very specific way. And he knows, there's nobody that knows me at my core more than my kid. There's my few close friends and a couple family members. They know exactly who I am, and the rest is what we allow them to see. It's a show. It's a show. You remember the scene in Rocky? I know you remember every word of every Rocky movie, Paul. So you remember the scene in Rocky when Rocky 3, where Rocky fighting Hulk Hogan, right? Thunder Lips. And they're going at it, and Thunderlips is destroying him, and Rock's like, what the fuck? And Mickey's like, it's supposed to be a show. He's like, I don't know, it's supposed to be a show, Mickey. He takes the gloves off and they start fucking really going at it. And then at the end of the match, Rocky goes to Thunderlips. He's like, hey, you really went kind of hard there. And then Thunderlips says, and it just always kind of stuck with me. And he's like, it's all part of the show. And then and that's that. And kind of shakes his head. And I was like, yeah, dude, that's it's what we're doing. This is pro wrestling. It's theatrics. There has to be good guys and bad guys, and there has to be, emotional connections on every level. And if somebody hates me, dude, everyone hated Queen Cersei, but Game of Thrones would not exist without Queen Cersei. She was one of the most incredible characters of all time. What an incredible character and what a journey. Remember at one point, season 5 or 6, we're like rooting for Queen Cersei. Like, what the fuck happened here? She murdered a child 2 seasons ago. And we, so that's the way that I sort of look at all of this, is like, even the people that hate me, I'm just sort of a character in their world. And if they hate me, I'm doing something right because I'm getting an emotion out of them.
Yeah. And you said what you said before too. It's like, if you hate me, I could turn that. And I've had that happen where someone's like, fuck, like somebody said something about my special. And I go, actually, if you watch, and he goes, oh shit, my bad, dude. I'm actually a fan. I'll watch it again. And it was just like, oh, you're just trying to be, you're just trying to get in the mix somehow. It's the people that ignore you that is the ones that you should want to go after too. That's really smart to look at it. And it is a show, especially with podcasts and especially when we're joking. And that's all. But for me, it was, like I said, like, I know me and my wife came to your house, dude, and we saw, like, you're a great dad. Dude, I remember one time you were like, I was like, dude, tone it down. You're fucking making me look like a fuck. You were like, oh, we're going to get the kids. We're going to fucking carve pumpkins, dude. We're going to get, it's going to be a great time. And I'm going, wow, dude, this guy gives a fuck, like really gives a fuck, and then, so knowing that, and I'm like that, and we're good guys, we're good fathers and stuff. And then somebody saying some evil shit, it makes and I would get that fucking vengeful. And then now I'm just like, no, dude, you know what? I'm doing something right, man. Fuck them.
I mean, look, the greatest thing that, when you're an incredible father as well, I watch what you do with your kids. We're creating the next generation of people that are just going to be really good, well-adjusted people, right? So my kid's not going to have to make fucked up jokes or need attention or go get pussy after shows every night like that. He's just not going to have that same life because he's raised with love. He's raised already with, that feeling of, that feeling, like I said before, we're chasing this feeling of greatness, right? He already gets it. He already gets that feeling that he is great and he's worth something and worthwhile. So he's not going to need to go down those paths. And it's also, I'm raising him for a different world. I know the world we're in now. You can't say the same shit. We used to play crazy we used to just do crazy things. I remember in middle school, in the 6th grade, my gym coach would divide the class up by race.
Wow.
He'd be like, all right. He was like, the white kids are against all the brown kids now. And we play basketball. It was we call it race wars, and it was hilarious. It was so funny. Everyone got it. Nobody was sensitive. Nobody gave a shit. It was he was like the great white hypes versus the this gym coach was the old Italian guy, just such a fucking old racist, hilarious, but it was just humor. It was nobody felt less than. The brown kids were destroying the white kids in the games. So it was like, it was just, that was my foundation. That's, and we talked about comedy before, Eddie Murphy talking about being on welfare, talking about getting his ass beat, his dad kicking the fucking dog, all of these things where it was like really dark, fucked up humor. That was what was relatable to me about this. It was, we talk about these fucked up things, and it is a cathartic experience it's very therapeutic to work out. My mom died of cancer when I was 22. My dad was murdered when I was 4 years old. For me to find the funny in that and to have to explore that mentally, to get through the hurt and find the funny, it's, in my opinion, it's taking it way further than simply just sort of coming to terms with things. So that's why I think they say comedy is very therapeutic. And I know you got to go here in a second, but I'll say one more thing about what influenced me. So when I moved to New York City, it was days before 9/11. I started going to Baruch College in 2001. I did a year of community college. I graduated in 2000, did a year of community college. Then I followed my girlfriend to the city because she was going to FIT. I was like, I got to find a city university. Started going to Baruch College when 9/11 hit. I was in school when 9/11 actually hit, like down Lower Manhattan, 23rd Street. And I started selling comedy club tickets a few days before 9/11 as well. That's how I got introduced to the world of comedy, like in a real way, because before it was just Eddie Murphy on TV, everyone on it seems so big. Like what was even the path to start comedy? I didn't know about open mics. I'd never heard the word open mic, right? So this was my first experience with comedy. I was selling comedy club tickets on the street. And
Was it
9/11
for
happened.
Ha? It wasn't for Ha, was it? Was it for
This
Ha
is way
comedy?
before Ha existed.
Oh, okay.
This is the New York Comedy Club, Al Martin New York
I
Comedy Club.
remember that's the first place I ever did it.
Before he opened up Broadway, which was the Improv when he first opened it up. This is before he even opened up Broadway Comedy Club. It was just the New York Comedy Club, the only club that he owned. And 9/11 hit, and we had to take a few days off of selling comedy club tickets. And it was probably about a week we had to take off. And it was this, no, less than, it was like 5 days. Saturday after 9/11. 9/11 was a Tuesday, I believe. The Saturday after, we were out there selling comedy club tickets again. And that next weekend, less than 2 weeks later, we went to go see a show on a Friday night, and it was fucking packed. Just absolutely packed, front to back, dude. New York City, fucking. When New York had this attitude after 9/11, like, fuck you, New York strong, the terrorists aren't going to win. Build that fucking Freedom Tower twice as high as the fucking Twin Towers were. Fuck that. New York, it was a beautiful experience. Like, it was awful. It was the worst thing in the world. But to live in New York during 9/11,
I
to
remember,
watch the way the city came together. And by the way, I didn't really see any like anti-Muslim racism. I wasn't seeing that, like, and I was on the streets. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like I was selling comedy club tickets. I was just meeting random people every single day. It was more like everyone was in this together. It really united New York in a weird way. And I went to this comedy show on the Friday night, and it was like, it wasn't even like a crazy lineup. It was probably like Greg Rogel. It was probably like trying to remember. So it was a dentist. Trying to remember his name. You remember this guy? He was a dentist.
New York Comedy Club's the first place I went. Steve Aarons booked me on a bringer.
Steve Aarons, that weird gay guy who would touch all the young comedians. Ozzy Baez was the God
passed away, right? Rest his soul.
Yep. Yeah, loved Ozzy Baez. But the host of the show, it might have even been Ozzy, but he kept on bombing a joke, right? It was a packed club. He kept on bombing. And you remember the New York Comedy Club was New York City skyline. That's the logo, right?
It wasn't Brick Mason, was it?
I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay.
But he kept on bombing jokes, and every time he bombed a joke, he would go, and it was like just the comedy law of three. Is the third time he did it, he bombed the joke, he went and crashed it into the World Trade Center on the logo behind him. This is 9 days after 9/11, dude. The audience went ape shit, dude. It was literally people stomping in the aisles laughing. They couldn't handle how fucking funny it was. And that's why I became a comic. Right there, that moment. It's not that I went, I'm going to do comedy now, but that was the moment that sort of stuck out to me that made comedy incredible and powerful and cool and fucking therapeutic. And it was, this city was just the worst atrocity you could possibly imagine. And the only way this group of people dealt with it, and people were in that audience that lost family members without a doubt, without a fucking doubt. But everyone said, this is how we're going to deal with it. By laughing, by we take this awful event, and we have these professional comedians that are going to just try to find the funny in the awful. They're the rubble of fucking awful. They're going to try to find these little gold gems. And that was like wow, dude, like what an incredible thing. And now it's changed. Like now that we have this whole like moral cleansing that everybody's doing, and it's like no, this is what fucking comedy is to me, and I will not conform from that. I will not change from that until they will not put a microphone in front of me. I will not change from that.
I agree with you, man. And I noticed the change I hate to say this, but I noticed the change the last year before pandemic, the last year at the Cellar, where I would go on and, I was doing a bit about the WNBA and some anti-feminist joke, just a joke. And I just saw this fucking difference. I just felt it. And then I would have other comedians go, dude, what's going on with these people? And it was weird because it seemed like the Cellar more than the Stand, even around the same time. Because I don't know if it was where the Stand is. I don't know if it's because people from Brooklyn were coming into, but I just noticed this like shitty feeling where like as soon as you would go into something that could possibly offend, arms being crossed, and then you'd go on the road and that wasn't the case. And I'm going, wait a minute, is New York comedy changing for the worse? And I hate to say it, but it was. And then somebody said, well, LA a little bit too, not as much. I got to go out there and do the Comedy Store and the Laugh Factory, and I had a good time. And I'm going, wait a minute, New York right now in
New York's acting like LA is supposed to be acting.
New York is the worst. As much as I hate to say it's where I got my bones. New York comedy scene was changing for the worse at one of the best clubs in the world, as Comedy Cellar. And you're going like, are people, and I was just, and then the pandemic hit, man. And
Well, Comedy Cellar, what happened with them was that name became uh, it was more popular than any of the comedians that were getting on stage. It was almost like this like trendy thing to go. When you come into New York, you go to the Comedy Cellar. Whereas I think the Stand, it was built off a foundation of comedy fans. And I think it's just a little different. I think most of the time when you go to the Cellar now, it's not a bunch of comedy fans. They don't really give a fuck.
Tourists and shit. Yeah.
Tourists, it's fucking Wall Street guys, it's people that think they're cooler than the comedians on stage. Whereas like at the Stand, I feel like
that's a great point.
It's just sort of like a level of respect that the audience seems to have for the performers. And I just think it's because it was sort of built off this foundation, because those guys are comedy fans. And I don't really know the guys who own the Cellar. I worked the Cellar a bunch years ago, and you know, I don't really know the foundation when that was like built. I'm sure they were massive comedy fans. I mean, obviously they have so much history, but I feel like it shifted a little bit, and they're looking for the cool kids. They're looking to do what the industry is asking them to do. And I think that, you know, it's from the management down. You have the, management thinks of things a certain way. There's a culture with the employees. There's a culture with the audience that actually comes there. So I just look at, Chris, Paul, and Patrick, those guys, and obviously, God rest Dave's soul.
Oh man,
those guys, love them or hate them, they love comedy, love it. They're fucking nerdy fans. They were running blogs and fucking writing about comedy before.
Oh, dude, they managed me.
It was anything. They managed me too.
Yeah. You know what? You were talking about like something like 9/11 and like darkness, and then trying to find like light in it. And when David died, when David got murdered, dude, that was the first time, Lewis, honestly, that was the first time hearing about somebody that I knew dying put me in a place for like a week that I've never been before, as far as sick, depressed. I was in a weird fucking place, right? And I start coming out of it. And the first actual funny thought that I had about it was, I go to New York Comedy Club, the new one that Emilio opened on East 4th, right? And I'm in there, and I'm kind of coming out of it. My wife was with me, and the guy's like, "Oh, dude, we'd love for you to come up and do a set." This guy that runs Fairfield Comedy Club had a show there. Yeah, if you want to get on stage. And I was kind of down for a while. I was like, yeah, let me just get up and get rid of some of this stage rust, go on there, hopefully kill for 7 minutes and get the fuck out of here. And I'm sitting there, and the guy's like, "You all right, man? What's going on?" And I just go, "Yeah, man." I had a buddy of mine, and he was murdered in his house, and the nanny was murdered and everything. And the dude just goes, "Been there." I'm just like, really? I'm like, really? Like,
that's hilarious.
Are you trying to one up me on my fucking grief here? Been there? Really? Like, are you going to go into your story, dude? And it was like the first time where I actually kind of laughed about it. And I'm like, right. I think I'm going to write that down and do it on stage. Cause it was just like, been there. It was, who the fuck says that?
That's funny.
But it reminded me of when you did the airplane air into the thing. And it's like, because in a weird way, that little funny twist of it kind of just lets it go and makes it, and it kind of gets you go, you know what, man, humor will get us through this. I want to ask you one thing before we go, because you brought it up, and my wife and I talked about this last night in the kitchen before dinner. So you had a hard time growing up. Obviously you had horrible things happen to your parents, rest their souls. My life, when I was 5, my parents, there was just some shit that went on, and it kind of sucked. And then we moved a lot, so I always had to keep proving myself. And then, listen to Paul tell that story. Oh, he's funny. Or I would do impressions of Eddie Murphy, and that's what would get my friends to like me, and that's what would do it. And so we went through that, and that's kind of why we are where we are now. We do what we do now. But I said to my wife, I said, Lucas and Sophia, and I'm sure your son James as well, who's a great kid, by the way. We went to your house. He's so like respectful, hilarious, but they're just going to grow up so much softer than we are. And I said to my wife, I go, look, these kids don't know what they have. I was like, we got Lexuses. We got a fucking big house, a big yard. They're going to great schools. Let's be honest. They're going to be a little softer than we are.
Of course.
And listen, I'll take we were talking about you're barking in the city around 9/11. I was knocking doors selling phone cable internet in Queens and Manhattan at night during dinner time around 9/11. It's like, I don't want my kids, even if my kids are softer, I don't want them going anywhere near the shit that I did. Do you feel that way as well? I'm just like, if my son's a little softer, my daughter's a little softer, fuck it, man. That's the life I'm giving them. That's how I look at it.
I took my son skiing 2 days ago. I mean, come on. I never even seen a ski up until, a couple of years ago. My son, I never lived in a single family house up until this house that I'm in right now. The only time I've ever lived in a single family house in my entire life, we were on welfare, Section 8. I grew up being extremely aware of being poor, extremely aware of my mom being on welfare, food stamps, as young as I can remember. Just not knowing, not getting Christmas gifts certain years because there was just no money, no new school clothes. I started working when I was 10 because that was
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Rockland County, New York.
Okay.
Which is not, not far from where you're at. It's a little, a little bit.
Yeah, so you're over the bridge. So you grew up not far from where Levity Live is at the Palisades Mall?
That's in Rockland as well, but that's like a little bit nicer. That's West Nyack. I grew up in North Rockland area, which is Havishar, West Havishar. It's kind of a shitty area. And just poverty, and it's also poverty in the suburbs is much worse than poverty in the city. Poverty in the city, you are getting on a subway and there's a fucking millionaire sitting right next to you. There's
you're
a Wall
still
Street
in the city.
guy.
Yeah.
There's celebrities. You go to Broadway, you can dream. There's these just paths to big dreams that are right in front of you. When you're in the suburbs, nobody's getting out, nobody's motivated, or, rural areas, it's not a hard, fast rule, but, for the most part, it was like, there was nobody to look to, like, oh, wow, like, look at that guy or that chick or that person, even peripherally that I could see, just living their dreams. Like, nobody was living their fucking dreams. So you sort of get stuck in thinking that there is nothing bigger and there are no bigger dreams, and my son, whereas he's going to grow up softer technically, he's not going to get beat up by me or threatened by me or by kids in his neighborhood. And, he's also has so many advantages that will enable him to get so much further. That toughness isn't necessary. For some people it is. It's what you do with it. Most people that grow up tough and grow up in a shitty environment, they don't do incredible things. It is an exception to the rule. Most people stay in that, that
safe lane,
that bracket or wherever it is. People aren't jumping, social classes. It typically doesn't happen. So I think there's this sort of like, well, you got to be tough on him because you got to make it tough so he can become successful. It's like, no. People that have it tough typically aren't successful. They typically feel like shit. They don't have confidence. They don't think of the world as sort of their oyster and they can do anything. I think our kids are going to have those opportunities and that greatness is sort of built into their foundations. But, in terms of being tough, my kid does Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He does Muay Thai. He's been boxing since he was 3. Let some little fucking punk fuck with him. He doesn't even know because he's such a sweet kid, but he got popped to his punches. He knows exactly how to get into position. If somebody's bullying him, he knows exactly how to take him down. He does Gracie jiu-jitsu, and he's super healthy. He eats right. He's legitimately a good person with a good, kind heart and soul. Yeah. So there's no, it doesn't worry me at all that he's not dealing with those same types of adversities. The adversities will hit him, and he's going to have a support system and he's going to have a foundation of love that'll help him get through that adversity because he knows what's on the other side of it, which is, loving parents, great friends, great family. And that, in my opinion, that's a guiding light. The other shit, it's an old sort of way of thinking, like, oh, you got to be tough on these fucking kids or they're going to grow up with this pussy generation. I've never hit my kid once. He's never even been spanked on his hand. Like literally nothing. I raised my son completely peacefully. He's never been threatened with violence. He's never been yelled at. He's never been called names. I don't do any of that fucking shit. I treat my kid with respect. I have conversations with him. When I tell him no, I explain to him why. We have a conversation as to why he can't do that. And then I make sure he understands and we connect and I let him negotiate sometimes. Sometimes I say no and then I let him win the negotiation. Because he's got to learn what it's like to feel those endorphins of fucking convincing somebody and getting something out of it.
Yeah.
I'll talk forever about this shit, Paul.
Well, that's your, that's your sales background right now. Cause you're basically letting them know, like, look, you can use your mind to win, that's a smart tactic. I like that.
So what I did with my son when we first moved into this house, it was the end of the summer, it was September, and it was just getting a little bit too cool outside. It wasn't like summertime anymore. It was starting to be the fall. And my son, we had talked about doing a lemonade stand or an iced tea stand. And I was like, yeah, it's a little cold. It's not really the right time. So we decided to do a hot apple cider stand, him and my niece, who's 2 years younger than him, right? So he was 7 at the time, she was 5. And we did a hot apple cider stand. I bought a bunch of hot apple cider donuts and we would heat them up inside in the air fryer. And the hot apple cider, we kept it on the stove and we just replenished the bucket outside with like hot apple cider. And they were out there for like probably 45 minutes. And there's no foot traffic in my house. Like they're just sitting out in front of my house and there's no foot traffic really. And I just watched them sort of getting dejected, being like, damn, like, nobody's coming, And I was like, in my head, I was like, dude, I can't let these kids fail right now. Their first entrepreneurial experience, the first time they're trying to do something for themselves. In my opinion, it was so important for them to have a little bit of success here. So they sort of set this foundation mentally and psychologically for the rest of their lives that they can set a goal, do something. I'm a salesman and an entrepreneur deep down inside, right? So I just knew that it was not going to be good at this age for them to fucking fail. So I just went around the corner and there was this fucking cute black chick getting into a car and I was like, hey, look, miss. I was like, I'll give you $2. Can you just go buy a couple cups of apple cider from these kids?
That's
I was like,
great.
and she was like, oh my God, that's so sweet. She's like, keep your money, I'll go. So she, I snuck, like they didn't know I'd even left. She came back around and I was walking out and my son looked at me. He was so excited. And she bought, a couple cups of apple cider. That was that. And that point, it fucking just lit a fire. Then he was like waving cars down. He was like, oh, come. And dude, they made like $40, $35.
That's great.
And they really it just opened them up, but they needed that first sale to believe that it was possible. They had to get through that. Otherwise it was like, nobody's going to get this. And the little kid, they can get very, very dejected.
Sure.
Like if they failed, that could have been a lesson for the rest of their life that stuck with them.
Dude, that would have been a negative thing where they're like, oh, you can try something and not have it work, dude. That is a great story, and that is a great father right there. Louis J. Gomez coming on TVE, absolutely this was such a great conversation, such a great time, dude. You have
Thanks,
anything
Paul.
you have anything you want to plug, brother?
Yeah, check out my pods. I do 4 podcasts on my network. 22
Yep.
shows overall on the network. I do Legion of Skanks Realized podcast, Believe You Me, with former UFC middleweight champion Michael Bisping, where we just talk about MMA. And I just started a new podcast. This is the one that I want everyone to listen to or watch. It's called Gomez Watches Seinfeld. I had never watched Seinfeld ever in my life, not a single episode. So me and my sister, you mentioned my sister before, my sister, my sister, she's a psychopath, but we grew up the same exact way. We were built from the same cloth. And she's legitimately funny, great taste in comedy. You can't teach people good taste. She loves all the fucking greats. Really, really a funny chick. And what's funny is my sister wanted to be a comic when we were kids. She was just painfully shy. She would never try it in a million years. And she would do these before podcasts was even a thing. She would record these radio shows with her friends on a little tape recorder. It was an answering machine. They would record it and they do interviews with rock stars because they put it up to MTV, up to the TV, and tape the answers and give their own questions. And they would edit together these little and it was their own radio show. Her and her pen pal would send back their radio shows back and forth to each other. So my sister, who's 2 years older than me, the amount of influence that she had on me growing up, I can't even express it. I didn't even realize it until later on, sort of thinking about it. I was like, yeah, but I looked up to my sister. You have an older sibling who's 2 years older. You like all their music. You want to see the same movies they're seeing. You want to hang out with them. You're always looking up to them. And I was able to, carve out a career telling jokes and being on podcasts. And I wanted to pay my sister back in my own way and bring her in on this project creatively because she's so fucking funny. And the dynamic between us is great because the whole show is us watching an episode of Seinfeld. And we're started on episode 1. Now we're on season 2, episode 2 right now. We just did. We're going through the entire series, but it's essentially what would I do, in Seinfeld's case, as you fucked up, dirty comedian. Just me and Seinfeld are very polar opposites. And just sort of how these stories relate to our fucked up childhood growing up, because there's always something that we can sort of relate to. So the show's been really, really good. If you guys are Seinfeld fans, I think you'll really like it because it's going to be very nostalgic for you. But I really, really love this project. It's called Gomez Watches Seinfeld. So if you're going to subscribe to one of the pods, go to subscribe to that one and leave a little comment and a shout out.
Awesome. Guys, I'm going to be, and make sure you check out Gas Digital and all the podcasts. I will be at the Orlando Improv, March 24th, West Palm Beach Improv, the 25th. I'll be in Tampa Bay at the Side Splitters, May 20th to 23rd. I'm also going to Salt Lake City in June and Austin, Texas in June. Check out the Virzi Effect everywhere you get podcasts. Also, the new podcast with me and Bill Burr, Anything Better. Please like and subscribe that. And subscribe to my YouTube channel, all the YouTube channels. And this has been episode 484 with Louis J. Gomez. Until next week, I'm out of here. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Louis.